Hello, welcome to the home theater tour for 2024. So I know what you guys are probably wondering, how big is this space? So room dimension wise, we are looking at 14 feet from left to right, from wall to wall. From front to back, we are looking at 25 feet in depth. And then height wise, if we're talking about from the second row, from floor to ceiling, we are looking at about 8 feet. Keep in mind that I do have some carpet and some carpet padding, so shave off maybe a couple inches there, maybe 1 or 2 inches of carpet padding. And then at the front of the room, we are looking at 10 feet from floor all the way up to the ceiling. Again, keep in mind that I do have a subfloor here with carpet padding, and I have some OSB as well, and then of course the carpet itself. So shave off another 2, maybe 2.5, 3 inches off of the height from the front. So maybe you were looking at maybe like 9.8 inches or so. Now the good thing about having such high ceilings, at least in the front row, is now we get a really good clear separation between the top channels all the way down to the front seats. So when you have things like airplanes and all that stuff flying over your head, there's a real good sense of immersion. Again, in the back row, it's a little bit different. You can see here that I do have this is my top middle row of height channels. So in the second row, although it is only 8 feet in height, there's still a pretty good sense of immersion, because this is the, like I said, we have nice distance coming between me and the middle row. And then in the back row, pretty good distance as well. Would it be better if it was 10 feet in height? Yes, it would be, but still really good separation. Obviously, it would probably sound a little bit better if they were in ceilings, but just to make things a little bit easier, since this room is kind of dual purpose, it's like my own personal theater and also like a review room, that having everything being external, not in walls, but rather on ceiling and on wall, makes swapping out speakers and all that a lot easier for when I'm reviewing speakers. Since there may be times that I have to swap out the overhead speakers, I didn't want to have to keep trying to find the stud and drilling into the drywall. So I took a 2x6x8 piece of lumber that you can get at Depot or Lowe's and ran it widthwise across the room. This lets me screw different ceiling mounts into the beam, which I can move anywhere along that beam to get the desired position, all without ruining the ceiling. Now, one cool thing is that if we come around this way, is that I added this ramp in. So the ramp, it was a much smaller ramp at the old theater, but this one is a lot bigger. This is about a 7-foot ramp that goes from my second row all the way up to the front. And I added this in because since I am going to be reviewing a lot of speakers and subwoofers, it's a lot easier to get these heavy subwoofers in with a hand truck. So I can just wheel it in from the front of the house, come straight down to the ramp right behind the screen wall. And then of course, you know, I don't have ramps on both sides. I do have a set of steps over here on the opposite side of the room, on the right side of the room. So I put in these steps here. They're fairly long steps. I wanted to make sure that when people were coming down, they wouldn't just go over like a short, shallow step and maybe lose their footing and fall down. So I made sure that these were pretty long. I do want to add maybe some lighting on the step at some point in time, because when the lights are all off, it's kind of hard to find the step or the ramp. But the cool thing is that I did add some lighting here, some edge lighting around the bottom of the wall. Now let's talk about the walls really quick. So I wanted to kind of mimic what I saw or what I have at my local Dolby Cinema. At the Dolby Cinema, you have kind of a two-tone color. You have the top half of the wall is black, the bottom half is kind of a darker gray. Obviously, this is kind of a lighter gray. What I ordered online looks a lot different than what it looks like in person. So I did get all of this stuff from Acoustimac. This is their FR Executive Fire Rated Acoustic Fabric, which is essentially speaker grill cloth. Now, to create the panels on the walls, I took 1x2 furring strips, which you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's, and made frames out of them using a brad nailer. In each frame is 1-inch thick Owens Corning 703, which is used for absorption. I could have went with 2-inch, but I didn't want to take up too much wall space, otherwise that would leave less interior space inside the room, so I did make some compromises for aesthetics. Now, once all the frames are built, I stapled the fabric to the frames and used a laser level to align the finished panels on the walls. Now, one thing that Dolby also has in their cinemas, they have that LED strip that goes right through the center of the wall. So you get that nice separation and the accent lighting. This is the color they use in my theater. I've seen like different colors like red and actual blue. This is kind of like an aqua blue color. And the thing that you want to do if you're doing LED lights in your room is you want to get the right LED light, because you don't want to get LED lights that are kind of far away from each other so you don't see the individual LEDs themselves. These are actually what they call F-cob lights or cob lights. So it's basically just one long continuous strip of LEDs. I think it's something like 800 plus LEDs in a row, so that way you get a really tight spacing between each LED. What I did was I took an LED track and I kind of brad nailed it against the wall. Then when you put the LED lights into it, there's a diffuser strip that goes on top of it, which diffuses the light even more. So if you look around the entire room, you just see one smooth, continuous light. So you don't see like each individual dot. So everything stays really nice and smooth. And these lights don't cost too much. You can get them where they're HomeKit compatible, Google Assistant compatible. You can operate them in either Wi-Fi or in Bluetooth. And they don't, like I said, they don't cost that much. If you were to go something with like Govee or Philips Hue, like those Hue lights, they're like several $100s for like 16 feet or more. Whereas these lights, I think they were something like 30 bucks or something for like a 16 foot. Now, as far as speaker wise, I do have the RBH, full review on the channel. These are the RBH 661 SWRs. These are fairly compact speakers. I didn't want to go with something that would visually overpower the room, but I wanted something that could still play loud, have some bass output, and disappear into the room when the lights are off. Obviously, it's got to sound good too. They measure 7.7 inches wide by 22.5 inches in height by 5 inches deep, and they're made out of HDF, so they are super rigid. I do have a 12-layer bed channel, so I've got some wide channels here. This is my front right wide. I have got the first set of surrounds, which is here for the front row. I know I've gotten some questions of whether or not you can actually hear this, because this looks like it's shooting straight over everybody's head. This does have a slight little tilt to it. It's not shooting directly at the person sitting closest to it. I want to aim a little bit over that guy so it could hit the guy on the opposite side. So there is a slight tilt to it. Obviously, if it's directly shooting at the person sitting in that chair, it's going to be really distracting. Same thing with here. This is the second set of surrounds. So again, obviously this is a little bit different because this is a lot lower than that one. So it is kind of shooting into this guy's head. It is what it is. I didn't want to go too high because I didn't want it to be a little too close to the top rear Atmos height speakers. So that's the second set of, that's the right second set. And then we have the back speakers here. What I wanted to do was mimic the front wall. So you know how your front wall has left, center, right? I wanted to have left, center, right in the back wall as well. So you get a nice mirror. So all the speakers are pretty even to each other. So these are the back speakers, center back, and then we have the left back speaker here as well. And like I said, it's really important if you have a nice long room to keep a nice distance between like the second row and the back row. I know sometimes you can't help it. You might have to put your seats against the back wall, which really kind of just doesn't make sense because you're not really going to get good back separation. But if you're limited, that's what you got to do. But here I had enough space, so I've got about 4.5, 5 feet between your head and the back row of back speakers, back surround speakers. So you get a really good separation there. Unfortunately, this guy here is going to get stung with the side surround here. And this is the left side surround for the second row. Same thing, the left surround for the first row. And then again, we're just going to come around up front. This is the left front wide. Now, behind the screen, I do have, again, I have your left, center, and right. And I also got the subwoofers located behind there as well. As far as the front subwoofers, now that waveforming is out, I had to get all the available subs that I had on hand to try to make it work. So I've got a few different brands all mixed together. I still have the Power Sound Audio 21-inch subwoofer sitting right under the center channel, and in the corners I've got the RBH 1212s. Now I do have these elevated on stands. They're on 18-foot stands. They're on 18-inch stands. Now I did want to elevate them because Trinnov did recently come out with their waveforming for bass management. You know, they kind of want you to elevate the speakers off the ground, whether it's off the floor. Also, there should be another set of subwoofers up top about 3.5 foot from my ceiling, but I'm kind of making do with what I got right now. So what I did was try to get these subs in the middle of the screen as close as possible. And it does make a difference. Like, you can feel the bass actually coming straight at you directly from the screen, which is really cool. And then for height speakers, so these are my front heights right here. These are front tops rather. That's the, I've got two sets here. That's the front tops. Over here, right above, slightly behind the front row, I also have the middles. This is the top left middle. All 18 of these speakers are exactly the same, so I get perfect timbre matching no matter where you are. And you know, there were some concerns on the review video of whether or not the dispersion on these ribbon tweeters are enough to satisfy both rows. There was a slight difference vertically rather than horizontally. I think it's maybe like a 10-degree difference or so, but it's nothing that's gonna, you know, take away from you actually hearing what's coming from the height channels. Then again, I also have matching top rear speakers right behind the second row. Again, these are angled just enough where it's hitting the second row, your second row head, and shooting over, and then also hitting the front row as well. Now, as far as projector, I still have the JVC NZ8, which is right behind my hush box. Right now, this is not totally finished. I still have to like complete the hush box, because right now this is just fabric. There's nothing actually behind it, so you can still hear the fan. So the AC is like right next to it, so you can't really hear it, so it keeps the room really cool, so you can faintly hear the fan. But the JVC NZ8 is still there. I made sure that there's a shelf here, so if I'm reviewing different projectors, or if I want to do a comparison, I could just pop this off, put the other projector here so it's side by side, and then I could run that way instead of moving my own personal projector out of the way and then having to recalibrate and doing all that stuff. So I made sure that it's pretty easy just to remove this panel to put more projectors in. And the cool thing about this whole thing, you're wondering, why is your hush box so big? Well, it's because I do have the AC unit, the wall unit here. So I wanted to go all the way from wall to wall, left to right. So I wanted to cover it so if you're in the room, you don't know that there's a wall unit AC right here. But there's a whole opening right here so that the air flows out and into the room, so it keeps the room nice and cool. So that's why I decided to go all the way across. And the cool thing about doing that is that this is actually another shelf here. That whole thing is a big shelf. So it just so happens to work out that since I have to raise up the subwoofers for waveforming, I can put some more subs actually right up in here, just sitting right on the shelf. And this is like the perfect height. It's like 3.5 foot down from my ceiling. And so I can just put the rear height subwoofers right back there in the corners, opposite side as well. And then the riser is already 2 feet off the ground, and I have some subwoofers here as well. Now, the riser height had to be 18 inches high because on the other side of the door is the kitchen. So rather than opening the theater door and having to step down into the room, I had to make it level with the main height of the rest of the house. The benefit of that is when you come into the room, it gives a more convincing stadium height feeling since you have to step down to get to the first row. As far as building the riser, I used 2x12x16 lumber to frame out the riser, then I filled it with rock wool insulation and capped it off with plywood. Now, as far as subwoofers for my back row, I do still have the Rel HT205 Mark IIs. Then I got the big boy. I've got the RBH Unrivaled 21-inch. This looks like a little armoire or something back here. This thing rocks. This thing, if you saw the video, this thing weighs a ton. It's something like 360 pounds without the sand inside of it, but I put about 120 pounds worth of sand inside of it. So this thing weighs well over 400 pounds. Ideally, at some point, I am going to move this behind the screen, but since it is so heavy, it's gonna live right here for now, because as far as like the bass management on Trinnov, they want your best subs in the front wall and then your secondary, maybe less capable subs in the back wall. Obviously, this being here is not the best spot for it, so I will be moving it at some point behind the screen. So I got the Rel 1205 Mark II in the left corner. In the center back, I got the RBH21, and in the opposite corner, I have another Rel. Of course, at some point in time, I'm gonna get matching subs, so I wanna at least have 4 matching subs on the front wall, and then I wanna have 4 subs on the back wall as well. I might go DIY. I know I've been kind of against doing DIY, but I feel like with space constraints and all that and money-wise, that might be the best way to go, is just to make my own. It'll be a lot cheaper, and it should still sound pretty good from what all of you guys have been telling me. Let's just talk about the seating really quick. I know I've done several videos on these seats, but these are the Valencia home theater seating Barcelona seats. So what's really cool about these is that the rear back rest is only like 32 inches from floor to the back. So as you can see, I have clear, unobstructed room right behind my shoulders and behind my head. So if you're sitting in the back row, it's perfect because you don't have the backrest to block any surround sound information coming from the side or the back speakers. So you can get all the sound panning all you want and just perfect movement from left to right. And the cool thing is, why did I put these seats in the second row and not the front row? Is because the front row seats has a slightly higher backrest. Those are 39 inches from floor to ceiling for the front row. But since this is so low, this lets the sound pass through and hit the front row. So you don't have, again, no obstruction of sound from these speakers hitting the front row. So that's why I decided to go this route. And then these seats here in the front row, I've had these seats for, I don't know, maybe like 4 years, maybe 5 years. These are the Salamander Talia seats. The leather on these are so good. This is like, not that I'm knocking the leather seats on the Valencia, but this is like this is like another tier above the Valencia as far as like leather is concerned. Like I have several leather jackets that are almost made out of this same leather. It's got a slightly nice sheen to it, slightly reflective. Do I wish it was matte? I do kind of wish it was matte, but you could tell that this leather here is really thick, and it's gonna get a nice patina over time. Like this front seat is the one that I sit in all the time. It's got a nice little patina to it. It's not quite as glossy as the other two end seats. So these are really comfy seats. These are not electronic. They actually have little pull tabs, so if you pull it, then the footrest comes up. But the good thing about these, again, it doesn't have a really tall backrest. It's 39 inches, so I mean, it comes just under my neck. So I could still get a lot of information from the back speakers, also from the side speakers as well. You know, whereas like I think I reviewed something like the Tuscany seats where they come well over your head. I think that's really bad acoustically if you're really diehard into your home theater audio, or just like 2-channel audio. Just getting a chair with a high headrest really kind of diminishes your surround effect in your home theater. So I mean, I've always been an advocate for lower seat backs. So that's why I got these two seats. Obviously, I would like to get all matching seats at some point in time, but as of right now, this is what I'm working with. Really quick, let's talk about the screen wall. This sits about 3 feet out into the room, which gives me enough space to put some big subwoofers back there. It's all framed out with 2x4s. I've got the LCR sitting on top of some inexpensive foam panels, which I will redo at some point in time with better absorption. For the side walls, I do have 2-inch panels that are stacked from floor to ceiling. And I have the screen hung from the top of the frame. The fabric panels surrounding the screen are all friction fit, so they come off easily if I need to get behind the screen. As for the projector screen, this is a 150-inch 16:9 Screen Innovations Maestro 2. This is a white weave screen with a gain of 1.1. If you have a totally light controlled room, this will give you an excellent crispy image with no screen texture at the main seats. Now, the reason I went with a 16:9 aspect ratio screen was because I wanted to maximize the width of the wall, which came out to 130 inches wide by 73 inches in height. If I would have went with a scope screen, the width would still be 130 inches, but the height would have dropped down to 54 inches. Going 16:9 still would give me the same width as having a scope screen, but also having that extra height for all the various aspect ratio movies and shows that are becoming more and more common nowadays, especially with the switching aspect ratios in movies. If I had went with scope, the 16:9 content would be a whole lot smaller, so it really didn't make sense this time around. Now, as far as the equipment is concerned, this hasn't really changed much throughout the years, but let's go through it anyways. So starting from top to bottom, so on the top here, this is the RBH amplifier. This is the DA2602 DSP. This is powering the front subwoofers, the 1212s. This, of course, is the Kaleidoscape Strato S, which I've had for maybe like 4 or 5 years now. This is a 12 terabyte version. Below that, I do have the Zidoo UHD8000. This is their brand new player that they just came out with. It's their 8K upscaling player. Of course, it'll still do 4K 60, 4K 120 as well. So I've got everything. I've got 2 hard drive bays in this, and then I've got some extra drives hooked up via USB as well, some external HD drives. Below that is the brains of the operation. This is the Trinnov Amplitude 24. Although if you want to add the external DACs, you can go up to 28 channels. So this handles all the surround processing. And some questions that came up on my speaker review, the RBH speaker review, was how is it that you have 2 sets of surrounds? Well, with the Trinnov, you can have several sets of surrounds if you want to. So this will actually decode several sets of surround channels for 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, whatever you want. The Trinnov can do it. Below that, I do have the Trinnov Amplitude 8Ms. These are handling all the speakers except for one of the pair of heights, because I have 18 channels in there. These are only 8 channels apiece. I did have to get the Macintosh, put this into work. This is the Macintosh MC257. This is a 7-channel amp. This puts out 200 watts per channel, I believe. I'll put the specs on screen. So 200 watts per channel. So I am using only 2 channels of this to power actually 2 channels are powering the second set of surrounds. That's what this is used for. Again, I believe this is 200 watts per channel, and then same thing for the Trinnov Amplitude 8M, 200 watts per channel. And then second rack here, I do have a Middle Atlantic power strip. I still have the Zidoo UHD1000. I only have this in the rack because the UHD8000 does not do 3D, but this does 3D. So I'm only using this for 3D movies. Below that, I have the Magnetar, I think it's the UH or UHD9000 player. This is their flagship player. Honestly, I haven't really used this that much, but it's still there in the rack. And then below that, I do have the Panasonic UD9000 player. I've had this for about 4 or 5 years. This is still their flagship player. Actually, I think they have a newer version of this one, if I'm not mistaken. Although all the features are still exactly the same. So that's the 2 4K Blu-ray players, Magnetar and Panasonic. And then below that, I do have the RBH, another DA2602 DSP, which will put out 4,000 watts into the 21-inch subwoofer. Oh, and I almost forgot, as far as power surge and power conditioning, I am using the Audioquest Niagara 3000. I've had this for about 3 or 4 years now, and it has not let me down yet. Now, to control the entire home theater, I am using an app called Roomie Remote, which is available on iOS. I have this, of course, installed on my iPad, and I'm using this stand by iPort. So this actually charges the iPad magnetically, so I can pop it off and then pop it back on, and it charges wirelessly. So that's really handy, especially if you're going to use your iPad for a remote control. But with this app, you can see that I've got different activities. So very much like Harmony, how that has activities, this also has activities as well. I'm not going to go through like a run through, but let's say you wanted to do an activity. Say you wanted to use the JVC, you would click next, and then you can go through the setup. You can do the associated gear that you want to use with that specific activity. Then you click add, and then it would automatically populate here in the activities section. So it works very much like the Harmony used to work. Now, the main thing with this is, since everything is IP controlled in my home theater, I have nothing that is controlled with IR, meaning with a remote control. So right now, the only thing that I can't control is the Lumagen. So the Lumagen is actually in my theater right now because, as far as I know, you cannot control that with IP. If you can, I definitely don't know about it. For the time being, if you have something with IR control, you're going to have to buy an additional add-on. I think it's an IR blaster. I don't know exactly what the name is, but I know that you can use IR blasters with this, with a special adapter. But other than that, I mean, this has been really solid. Let's say I wanted to watch Kaleidoscape. I click on Kaleidoscape. Right now, I've got Furiosa playing in the background. If there's something else I wanted to watch, let's say I just click on this little book here. This brings up a list of all the movies that are on my Kaleidoscape. And then you just tap on it, and then automatically it'll just start playing War of the Worlds. And you can see here that this actually has a timeline, so you can actually scrub through your video. Different player controls here. You can design this however you want, so you can move the buttons around and everything like that. So you can tailor the controls any way that you want. And so this is the main page. This is going to control all the Kaleidoscape stuff. There's extra controls for the Kaleidoscape here if you tap on the Kaleidoscape icon. This is the main page for the volume control. Right now I've got it on mute. This here is the controls for my JVC projector right there. And then of course you can go back to the home screen, click anything else here for your activities, and then I can control my lights. I can turn them on and off. Here's my ceiling lights, my wall lights. If I just want to power on the Trinnov, listen to music, I can just click that as well. And then of course, like I said, this is very customizable. You can put whatever you want, whatever activities you want, and whatever direct controls you want here on the opposite side. So if your Harmony does not work anymore, then check out Rooming Remote. I've been using it for the past few years now, and it's been pretty much rock solid. Definitely worth the money. Well, that's it. That is the tour. That's pretty much everything. There are little things here and there that I probably didn't touch on, but you know, if you have any questions, definitely drop them down in the comment section. Now, big shout out and a big thanks to the guys over at Dream Media, Zach, Kellen, and the boys. They definitely helped me out with this build. So if you want to pick up something new for your home theater, definitely use the links down below in the video's description and visit the guys at Dream Media and tell them that I sent you. And also thank you to RBH, Shane over at RBH specifically, for coming over to my house and calibrating my system and this giant subwoofer. Thank you, RBH. And of course, thanks guys for sticking around the channel and watching me and my progress in growing the channel and growing all the many iterations of my home theaters, especially from my small apartment home theater to now probably my permanent home theater. I don't expect any major changes anytime soon in the future, maybe some speakers or subwoofers here and there, especially if they're coming in for review. But that's pretty much it, man. That's everything. That's done. It's a wrap. The home theater tour is over with. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.